The drama surrounding body image in combat sports has been quietly simmering beneath the surface for decades. Muscles have long been seen as the defining currency of athletic dominancy, visual shorthand for power, performance, and prowess. In the glossy promos and high-octane wanes, ripped physiques are celebrated, photographed, and broadcasted like trophies. But every so often, the script flips, and when it does, the world watches in stunned disbelief as the underdog of underestimated and often overlooked rises from obscurity and obliterates everything the aesthetics of athleticism were supposed to promise. This is the story of when muscles didn't matter. When the fat guys knocked the bodybuilders out, Coldan proved that strength isn't always visible. It lives in will, in grit, and sometimes, under a thick layer of KFC and dad bod. The saga begins with a man named Ansel, a fighter with a dismal professional record. 16 losses in 17 fights, he entered the ring more as comic relief than as a serious contender. The mere fact that anyone would call him an athlete seemed almost ironic. And yet, his next opponent, Eugenio Milazzo, might have felt relieved seeing Anzalone across from him. He probably thought he'd been gifted a punching bag instead of an actual fighter. The fight hadn't even started, and Anzalone was already sweating profusely, so much so that the referee had to literally wipe him down before the bell. But that sheen of sweat wasn't just a sign of poor conditioning, it was the calm before the storm. Because once the match began, something strange happened. This jiggling figure of a man, looking like Tyson Fury if he had spent his training camp inside a buffet, began launching punches with terrifying velocity. It was as if Milazzo had eaten the last slice of pizza at a family dinner. And Anzalone wasn't about to let that stand. With a swing that looked more like a cannonball than a jab, he sent Milazzo crashing to the canvas. The punch was heavy, fast, and completely unexpected. Just like that, the fat man had turned the joke on everyone else. He didn't look like a fighter, but he fought like one. And he won. Next came a man known only as Salt Papi, an influencer, a TikTok star, and someone who, at first glance, didn't look like he belonged in the ring. But for all the memes and mockery surrounding his physique, Salt Papi possessed something far more dangerous than abs: patience, precision, and power. His opponent, Josh Bruckner, looked like the final boss of a gym sculpted from marble, every inch of his body screaming alpha male. It was Peter Parker versus Ned, a visual mismatch if there ever was one. But Salt Papi didn't just hold his own, he toyed with his opponent. He moved with an almost mocking calm, dodging, weaving, and striking back with a smirk that seemed to say, "You trained for this. I was born for it." When Bruckner finally lunged, mistaking Salt Papi's glove for his head, it became clear the muscle man had forgotten to train the most important muscle of all, his brain. Like a matador taunting a bull, Salt Papi stepped aside, drew him in, and landed a devastating shot. Bruckner folded. The knockout was clean. The message: crystalline muscles are for mirrors. Victory belongs to those who understand the dance. In another bout, the same narrative played out once again. A super heavyweight division match between a t-shirt wearing, fast food devouring Drazen Janjunen and a protein shake powered Kevin Walter. Walter was every inch the bodybuilder, ripped and brimming with swagger, but his punches landed like feathers against the massive yet unexpectedly nimble frame of Janjunen. Despite his size, Janjunen moved with deceptive speed, dodging and weaving like a much lighter man. He let Walter swing and miss until the perfect moment presented itself, then landed a punch that could have dropped a charging bull. Walter hit the mat with a look not of pain, but betrayal, as if the laws of physics themselves had turned against him. He had entered the ring expecting a buffet. Instead, he became the appetizer. And then there's Mark Hunt, a name that echoes through the annals of MMA like thunder. At 48 years old, his belly told one story but his fists told another. Known as the Super Samoan, Hunt had spent a lifetime knocking people out. And now, as the years piled on and the abs faded under the comfortable cloak of middle age, he stepped into the boxing ring one more time against a young, chiseled fitness icon named Sonny Bill Williams. To the untrained eye, the fight looked like a pub brawl over the last pint. Hunt's belly jiggled with each step, while Williams looked like he'd just stepped off a Men's Health cover. The bell rang, and the young man came out swinging, confident and aggressive. But Hunt was unmoved. He waited, watched, and then, like a freight train on a collision course, he unleashed hell. Williams never saw it coming. Punch after punch cornered him like a child caught sneaking out past curfew. And then, without hesitation, Hunt ended it. A final blow, a knockout, silence. A man who looked like he'd eaten his way out of a retirement party had just dismantled the epitome of youth and fitness. The pub brawler had won, but this wasn't an isolated trend. No, around the world, stories began surfacing of fat men defying expectations, toppling statuesque warriors and redefining what it meant to be a fighter. Brazilian Saul Cavallari entered the ring against Denis Nadishkovsky, a man with a physique worthy of a Marvel contract. On paper and visually, Cavallar had no business being there. But fighting doesn't happen on paper. From the opening bell, the narrative began to unravel. Cavallari, big and round, hit with the force of a man who had nothing to lose. His punches landed hard. His footwork, while unorthodox, was effective. The so-called fit fighter was being schooled by a man whose body screamed couch potato, but whose fists wrote a very different story. And when the judges raised Cavallari's hand in a unanimous decision victory, the audience was stunned. Visually unbelievable, but entirely deserved. Then came the night that truly shattered the illusion. June 1st, 2019. Madison Square Garden. A heavyweight title fight between undefeated Adonis, Anthony Joshua, and the doughy underdog, Andy Ruiz Jr. Joshua's body looked like it had been carved by gods. Ruiz, in contrast, looked like he had wandered into the arena by mistake. Searching for a food truck. From the first bell, Joshua controlled the pace, smooth, efficient, and poised until round 3. Ruiz, having absorbed just enough punishment, snapped back like a rubber band. A flurry of punches dropped Joshua. The world gasped. Then Ruiz did it again, and again, until the unthinkable happened. Anthony Joshua, the golden boy of boxing, was knocked out cold by a man who looked like he just stepped out of a taco truck. It was one of the greatest upsets in boxing history, but more than that, it was a cultural reset. Ruiz shattered the myth that muscle equals might. In doing so, he became a hero to every underdog who'd ever been underestimated for their looks. But perhaps the most symbolic of all these battles occurred back in 1995. A bout between Doug Norris, a muscle-bound titan, and Eric Butterbean. Butterbean was everything wrong with a fighter according to traditional standards. Overweight, slow, barely mobile. But when the bell rang, none of that mattered. The punches he threw carried the weight of a sledgehammer. Norris danced, flexed, and posed until he was eating canvas. The crowd roared, not for the bodybuilder, but for the man who looked like he'd lost a bet and was forced into the ring. Butterbean became a symbol, proof that underneath the fat could live a fighter more dangerous than any gym rat. And then, the tale of Alexander Emelianenko, a Russian legend, a warrior, a knockout artist feared around the world. At a press conference before one of his fights, he mocked his opponent, a red-bearded 140-kilogram mountain of a man who looked more like a biker than a boxer. He laughed, he teased, he saw a joke, but the joke turned deadly. 13 seconds into the first round, the bearded underdog threw a punch that landed with the finality of a sledgehammer. Emelianenko crumpled. The fight was over before it even started. The legend had been silenced by a man everyone had written off. The audience was left in disbelief. The odds were shattered. The story was rewritten again. So what does all of this mean? Why do these moments matter? Because they challenge us to rethink our assumptions, to question what strength really is. Muscle mass may be impressive in a mirror, but in the arena of combat, it's not the size of your biceps that counts. It's the heart behind the punch, the experience etched into every movement, the patience to wait, the courage to strike. Time and time again, the so-called fat guys have proven that they are more than their appearances. They are warriors. They are fighters. They are champions. And while the world remains obsessed with abs and physiques, these men are reminding us of a deeper truth, one forged, not in the gym, but in the fire of real combat. Appearances deceive, but fists never lie. If this story caught you off guard, if you found yourself rooting for the underdog, questioning your own assumptions, or just wanting to see more, then you're exactly who this channel is for. What do you think defines a real fighter? Is it aesthetics, or is it something deeper? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a knockout story like this one. Because in this ring, looks don't matter. Does